Hello everyone, welcome back to the Keep Productive YouTube channel. Today we have the CEO of Coda here with us, Shishir Mehrotra. I've got 5 questions for you, Shishir.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
I'm
How's
doing great.
everything? That
Yeah.
wasn't one of the questions, but
First wish is more wishes, right?
yeah, that's it. Yeah. I think the last few weeks, especially, been quite exciting for you guys, and well, especially the last few months have been sort of like a good roller coaster.
Yeah.
And obviously, the other day you released packs, which was really exciting. What are the things you guys are working on currently? I guess what's the update at Coda?
Yeah, sure. So I prepped a few things to show you, and I thought I'd start with the newest. And why don't I just get up on screen here? And maybe just as I do this, so we launched about 6 months ago, and have been iterating as fast as we can, taking in feedback, introducing some things that the community requests, and some things that were things that we think might be interesting, but they may not have thought of yet. And so I'll show you a little bit of both the directions. And I thought I would just, first off, here we go. Can you see my screen there?
Yeah, it's all good.
Um, Great. And just for your viewers that might not be as familiar with Coda, just as a reminder, I like to say this is Coda. It's just a doc. And for anyone who has forgotten, the name Coda comes from a doc backwards. So the heart of what we do at Coda is build a new type of all-in-one document. Allows you to mix documents, spreadsheets, presentations, applications all together into one place, and in particular allows you to make docs as powerful as apps. And so there's a number of things we've been working on. I thought I'd start with the most recent, which is this update you just mentioned. We called it the new Coda Packs with Data Sync. And just as background, we've had this notion of packs for about a year now. And the way packs work is packs allow connecting different services into Coda. And so you can connect up Coda to Slack and Gmail, Intercom, Figma, GitHub, so on. And so as part of this release, we announced a couple new things. We added a new capability to most of the packs, something we call packs tables. And we also added a new set of packs. The two most popular of that set are Shopify and JIRA. Those are very heavily requested packs. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a demo of what this new capability does. Let me just back up here for a moment. So let's add, and I'll just give you a very simple one for calendar. And then I'll show you the building block, and then I'll show you a few ways that it gets put to use. So the process of setting up a pack is pretty straightforward. You connect your account, you set up your permissions, and now you're connected. So you have now the Google Calendar is connected to this document. And the newest feature here is this thing we call Packs Tables. That allows you in just a couple clicks to go ahead and synchronize in your a data set. So in this case, your calendar. And so this is my personal calendar. I'll unwrap this so you can see all of it. And it's got a number of different events in there for the next week. We're headed down to LA or actually to Irvine to celebrate my in-laws' anniversary and my little nephew's birthday. But this is just a normal table in Coda. You can do all the things you can normally do in tables here. So, for example, with the calendar view, you might want to look at it on an actual calendar. It's a very typical thing to do. Or you might want to do things that you often do in Coda, like you can add columns to it. So, for example, maybe one thing I might want to do is say, hey, I'm just going to try to keep track of how each meeting went. Or maybe I'd like to do something like add a goal for every meeting. And maybe at the start of the week, I'll go through and say, don't forget boarding passes. My daughters are in a robot league, so it's prep the robot. So that's kind of the building block, is it allows you to synchronize in data from a number of these different data sources. One of the most fun parts about this launch is we worked with a few of our makers to create some great examples. I think you've mentioned before our template gallery, and some of the interesting things people post in there. So I'll pull that up here. And you'll see a new set of templates here. It's big. You know, as a reminder for your viewers, these templates are mostly submitted by our community. There's some really interesting cases in here, and we let a few people have a look at PAX tables a little bit early and saw what they built. One of my favorites is this one. So I'll start here. So this is from Des Trainer, and do you know Des? This is the
I don't
co-founder.
know.
So he's the co-founder of Intercom. So if you actually just go back a tab for a moment, this little question mark button that we have on Coda and that exists on a lot of different sites, that's Intercom. They do a lot more than that, but that's how most users interact with them first. Des is one of the co-founders there, and really interesting entrepreneur. Also happens to be a pretty prolific writer, and often writes about interesting topics. Sometimes posts about them on Twitter. And so he had this tweet that I thought was really interesting, and he said, "Thinking about productivity and tools. Your email is what others think you should work on. Your to-do list is what you think you should work on, and your calendar is usually what you actually work on." And he had these great Venn diagrams to kind of make this point. Just as a fun side note, Coda allows you to embed different things. So this is actually a live view of his tweet. So it looks like about 1,300 people really liked it. You know, it's pretty insightful, and a lot of great Coda templates start like this. They start with an idea that gets brought to life in Coda. And so he picked up this PAX tables feature and turned it into a template. So what you can do here is, you know, those 3 different things: your to-do list, your email, and your calendar. So you set up your to-do list. You sync in your email. So one of the PAX tables is for Gmail. In this case, he's filtered this to any message that he has starred in Gmail will show up here. Then you sync in your calendar, and then he's got this sort of 4-step process for what you should do. And you start with take your email and turn them into to-do. So you take every email, you either link it to an existing to-do or you add a new one. Then you do the next step. You take all those to-dos, and then you either link it to an existing calendar event or add a new one. And you can see your calendar here as context. Then as you run your week, you get context. So as you go through your to-do list, you know where you're going to work on each thing. And as you go through your calendar, you know which to-dos you're trying to accomplish in each thing. And the punchline of this template is at the end of your week, you look back and you say, what portion of my time was spent on things that had a link to do or no link to do? And so you get this, you know, the kind of the Venn diagram from his tweet, in this case represented as a bar chart, as a good way to put that system together. So I thought this was one interesting example. There's a couple others here that I think you might enjoy.
We'll definitely link to that one below, because I think people will find that one super valuable. Really
yeah,
cool.
I actually show you just on the calendar note. I'll show you one more that is even simpler to start. And this one's mine actually. But this one, and there's I call it color what matters, a little bit of a play on words with measure what matters. And the basic idea here is, you know, I'm pretty religious on coloring my calendar, and the colors of my calendar are very meaningful. But it's kind of a pain in the butt to do. And you have to sort of go through each thing and make sure you color it. And, you know, one really important thing is the colors on the calendar are really just proxies. Like actually, if you don't know the names of the actual colors on the Google Calendar are things like tomato, which, you know, that barely means a color to me. That definitely doesn't mean a category. And so the way this template works is, it's a easy, fast start. You sync in your calendar. It pulls in the colors from calendar. You go through those colors then, and you categorize them, and you label, okay, this one I'm going to call, instead of work time, I'm going to call this commute. And maybe a one-on-one sounds good for this. And then you go through all your events and you color code them. And probably easiest thing to do is filter to the ones that are uncategorized, and just make sure you set up a category for each one. Then you click one button and it'll update all those colors, and then you can go analyze your time. How is my time distributed between those different categories? There's a little GIF here at the front showing how that works. You can sort of, it's kind of fun. You'll see it'll press one button and this calendar over here will all turn colorful. And I got one last one on PAX tables to show you. So I'll jump to another pack, which is JIRA.
So that's just a note on that one. That's a two-way calendar sync, right?
Yeah. So the way these templates work, if I just go back for a moment. So we have this notion in Coda of go back to where I was, and that's a good example of a two-way example. So the way packs work in Coda is packs have two different capabilities: to pull data in and then to push data out. The way you push data out is using buttons, and so each of these buttons is what's actually doing the sort of pushback into calendar. So when I click this thing to product, this button here, that's actually doing the pushback. And so you can use that to create not only what you can think of as sort of synchronization, but you can also use that to create actions. So you can do things like, for example, click those buttons to create a new calendar event or to send an email to someone. One thing a lot of our users end up doing is hooking those up to what we call automations. And so you can set up rules here, for example. Let's say whenever something happens, go and take a particular action. So for example, for calendaring, if I don't want to remember to set these buttons, click these buttons all the time, I can just say, every hour, just go and click those buttons for me. So, okay, I had one last one. So,
sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no, of course not. Please ask questions. Let's see, that's Dez's, let me just go back and look for it. I wanted to show you one for JIRA, and JIRA is really interesting because it's one of our most requested packs. A lot of people use JIRA, and for this one, there's a lot of templates in the gallery that showcase what to do with JIRA, but I thought this was a really fun one. This is from Adam Nash. So Adam is currently the head of product and growth at Dropbox, but before that, he was CEO of Wealthfront, and he was a product leader at LinkedIn, eBay, and Apple before that. He's been a product leader for a long time, writes about a lot of interesting things, and he wrote a post that's really popular called Product Planning in 3 Feature Buckets. And the idea is pretty simple. His idea is that when you're planning, you should divide your features, instead of comparing them all against each other, divide them into 3 buckets: metrics, movers, customer request, and customer delight. And that what you should really think is, within each bucket, am I prioritizing the right thing? And then do I have the right mix across them? And you can see, he's got 3 million people have read this, which is pretty fun. So he turned this into a template here. And the first step here is it synchronizes in your JIRA issues. And so it pulls in all of the issues you have. You can go and pull as many different fields out of JIRA as you like. These are all different fields that you can grab. Right now, we're just showing the status and the name of the issue. The next step is to go classify those. So you go through each thing and you say, is this for metric, delight, or request? You can go look for what he calls holes in the blog post, which is basically the mix. Do you have an appropriate mix of what you think is delight, metrics, and requests? And then within each bucket, this is just a filtered view of just show me the ones where bucket is metric. And for each of those, I want to go and pick which of our core metrics is it related to. Maybe this one is related to engagement, or maybe it's related to retention. And then you go through customer requests. You say, all the ones I tagged as customer requests, we have a set of customer request trends. which one is that related to? And so you can go pull that as well. And then finally, you have customer delight. And generally, these are best showcased with a picture. And so you might just embed a picture here and see what you're working on. So anyway, those are three examples of great templates that basically, if I were to step back and look at this launch, what we wanted, Coda's full of building blocks, and they allow you to reassemble them into lots of interesting different things. This case with Pax Table, the way I think about it is it allows you to create building blocks that represent the rest of your world. And so you can now pull those in, work them into your process, whether you're changing how your personal productivity works or how your team does product planning. There's some great examples in here of using Shopify or using GitHub or so on to do very similar things. So that was the most recent thing we worked on. Happy to show you others, but I'll pause for a second. Questions and thoughts?
Yeah, no, that was really good. I think for personal productivity, it's come a long way, which is fantastic. And obviously that's some great use case, like the packs actually engaging with other apps that you use on a routine basis. One of the next questions I had for you was more about the team side. See a lot of teams looking at Coda as a way to sort of move forward. What are you guys seeing, at least in the last 6 months, with teams joining Coda? Are they finding experience in enriching? Are they replacing project management experiences as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a pretty wide variety of teams jump into Coda and build all sorts of interesting things. There's now thousands of teams using Coda across the world, growing very quickly. There's a set of things that we've worked on for teams that are particularly interesting. Let me see, I can show you a couple. Actually, one that wasn't sort of directly targeted at teams, but ended up having more impact than we expected is, I think you covered this in your last video, but we did a pretty major visual refresh to the product, and this was the before and after to give more space for maker documents. But the ones that I think are most interesting, there's two that we shipped recently that are really interesting. One is we made a big update to Coda filters. So a very powerful part of Coda is this ability to filter data. And one of the pieces of feedback we often get is that the Coda formula language is really powerful, and you can do just about anything with it. But for some people, it can be intimidating, and especially as teams are rolling out. Usually one maker will start and build up something. It might be a project tracker, an inventory tracker, or some way to even just do simple things like track meeting notes, and they'll embed a table, and then they'll their collaborators will come in and want to make adjustments. And what we were finding was that some people found this powerful and other people found it intimidating. And so we built a new filtering experience. And one of the things the team did was spend a lot of time looking at inspiring experiences, not just from other enterprise applications, but from things around the internet as well. Looking at sites like Kayak and how they do filtering experiences. And so the way these filtering experiences work now is they all look like a series of builders that allow anybody to come in and sort of refilter or sort a different a table or view. And there's still the powerful builder is still underneath, so you can at any moment embed a formula or even flip the whole builder over and see the formula that's behind it. It's actually, from that perspective, it's turned out to be a great learning technique as well. People come in and build that way. But yeah, a very typical thing we see teams doing is they'll set up a space, say, okay, here's all the goals we're working on. They'll filter it down to each person or to the current sprint or whatever it might be. And then the next person wants to come in and say, I'm ready to advance it to the next sprint and wants to make a quick update. So this is one big thing we worked on recently. The other one, this one has a lot of plumbing underneath it, but is a really beautiful feature in how it came together. Is we call these in-doc templates. So our templates are really commonly used, but they tend to be sort of whole experiences. Some of the ones I just showed you, it's a whole productivity system or so on. But a lot of times what people are trying to do is remix into a thing that they're already building. And so I'll show you. I'll go back to this doc over here. And just show you a quick example. So the way these templates work is they look like a panel over here. You can go and, let's say, for example, I'm doing my my daily stand-up, and maybe I'm taking some notes, and I have item 1 and item 2, and then at some point I decide, hey, we actually need to keep track of our list of items that we need to go work on, and maybe assign them out to different people. I can, from here, use that filtering experience to go do things like, maybe the obvious one to do here is say, let's just look at the ones we're done as unchecked. It's a very simple way to get to that. But the interesting thing about this is it allowed introducing some templates that are really powerful. But sometimes people were struggling to pull them out of the bigger templates. And there's a whole set of them here. If I had to pick one theme we've seen most commonly with teams is, I think when we launched a very common use case was building project trackers. These days, I'd say one of the most common emerging use cases is that we hear from our users and makers is using Coda to run meetings. And so a lot of these templates, you'll notice the ones that sort of float to the top have to do with things that you do commonly in meetings. So for example, this one's one of my favorites, ends up in many of our docs, is you'll be in the middle of a meeting and you say, I just want a place for everyone to be able to ask questions. And you can say, I have a question about launch. And everybody can go and upvote and downvote those questions and put them in place. The other one that we end up using a lot, and we see this one used fairly often. Where is it here?
You've got so many of them.
Yeah. So actually what I was saying is the plumbing underneath this, these things are actually, the big thing we built was very rich copy paste. And so many features in Coda, it's a little hard to see the hard engineering work that goes into a feature like this. But really what's happening is what we built is the ability to take any region, if you hit copy and then hit paste, that ability to do the paste and keep everything connected and all the logic still works together, that's really the engine that works underneath it. After that, all we're doing with these is we've got a set of documents, and it's just pulling out of those documents. It's incredibly easy to create these. This is one of my other favorite ones. Is you're in a meeting and you say, how do you feel about the upcoming launch? And what this does is there's a little filter here, so you can filter down so everybody can only see their own sentiment. And everybody comes in and puts in their reaction and says, I feel great. And then I can go and unclick this and see what everybody said. And the interesting thing about these is, they're, obviously interesting demos, but from a perspective of changing how teams work, they're really impactful. Like this one, for example, when you're in a team and you say, how's everybody feeling about launch? The thing everybody does is you go around the room. And everybody says, first off, that takes time. Take a half hour going around the room. The other thing is it introduces lots of bias. Each person says something, and the next person, has to be a little careful not to
bring the mood down,
right? And same thing with the question moderators. Like a lot of people we work with have remote teams, and it's very hard, to go and ask a question when you're perhaps on the video chat. And so now everybody can ask their questions, and you just go through them in order. So you see the questions in ranked order of what the votes are. So anyway, those were a couple of the launches I thought were interesting. A new refresh for the whole look for the product, a new filtering experience, and these in-doc templates to bring a set of use cases directly into people's experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I think the team's experience has gotten a lot easier. Like I used to get quite a lot of questions through about the filtering and how that works, because that was, I guess it was quite complicated for just a basic user, but now it seems to be a lot more manageable to be able to go in like that and just be able to add in the filters you need. So great job with all of those updates. One of the things that obviously you guys are free at the moment, 6 months sort of publicly launched, but I think I saw somewhere that you guys are planning to stay free and have a free experience, but you have plans to release a premium experience of Coda?
Yeah, it's probably one of the most important things we're working on right now is a set of updates. I think of it as a set of updates for teams.
Yeah.
And there's a set of new features that we think are really compelling for teams, and we'll also introduce pricing as part of that. I think it's interesting. We get questions about pricing all the time, and I think that there's certainly a set of people that have enjoyed free experience. There's also a set of people nervous about pricing, and so we think it's very
Oh,
important to
yeah.
get that out and make sure people understand our philosophy for pricing. One of my key philosophies is for a product like this, where the market is very large, right? I mean, just about everybody uses documents, spreadsheets, presentations, applications, and so we think the market for these products is very broad. We think it's really important that people be able to start for free, and so there'll be a fairly generous free tier. I think that's something that's very important to our makers in our community. And then we have a set of things that are mostly oriented towards how we see teams and businesses operate that'll be paid. And I'll have more to tell you about that soon.
Sure. I think it's a good thing as well because it helps with the sustainability of the project. And I think people are really happy to pay for something that's, can go into that much detail for sure.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the next 6 months, do you have any features that you want to share with the community or things that you guys are particularly taking a focus on?
That's a good question. There's probably a few buckets I can think of. One that's top of mind is features and that I think of as increasing the universe of users who can even start with Coda. And in particular, we have two items we're working on there. One is moving our browser support. So today, Coda works in Chrome, and we're working to expand that list. And the other is account support. So today, to use Coda, you need a Google Gmail account, and we're working on expanding that as well. So that's one that's very heavily requested. I think the second bucket I'd say is taking that idea I showed with filters and taking it even further. And so we're working through the product. We're figuring out what are the things that people use most often, and in particular, the ones that impact, not only the first maker in a doc, but also all their collaborators. And we're taking each of those and applying a very similar lens to what we did with table filtering, and providing in different experiences to make that simpler, more flexible, and so on. And then the third bucket I'd say is features for teams, and sort of what we were talking about with alongside pricing is a set of features that help teams stay organized. Some of the most common requests there are ways to handle cases where I have a lot of documents, and so there's a lot of requests for how our doc list operates. There's a lot of requests there for handling documents with collaborators with different permission levels, and so we get asked a lot about locking in protections or working on things there. And then, of course, what we just launched with PACS tables, we have a lot of requests flowing in for different packs and different features to be added to some of the packs that are there. So those are some of the things we're working on.
Yeah, that's plenty. I bet that will keep you guys busy.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. And obviously, I've saved the toughest question for you guys for last, of course. It's obviously the elephant in the room, but not Evernote. But Notion, obviously, you guys have launched, and you've been working on it for a couple of years anyway. But there's obviously that sort of not neck and neck, but you guys are the two top dogs, I'd say, in the modular productivity space. How do you see Notion, and how's that competition going?
It's interesting. I'm really excited by competition. I think when we started the company, the question I got from a lot of people, investors, customers, so on, everybody's presumption was that this market was going to be a competition with the big players, and it's going to be all about what does Microsoft do and what does Google do, and of course it still is. I mean, most of the different, if I look at what most users are using when we get there, all of us together are still very small compared to the adoption of tools like Office and the Google Docs and so on. But it's been really interesting how many or how much progress the startups in this space have made. And I think it's from running a team perspective, I think it's great because it's fun to be up against insightful product thinkers as opposed to up against distribution machines. And then of course for users, it's great because they get the benefit of watching very fast iteration cycles and things the things for a space in particular that hasn't advanced, fundamentally in 40 years. The amount of innovation we've seen in the last couple of years is really exciting. And of course, you've covered a lot of it on your channel. I mean, to answer your question, I think first off, I'd say I think for your community, I think Notion is very popular. If I look at our user base, there's a few different buckets we get compared against. I like to call them the docs players, the tables players, and the apps players. So there's a set of people that come and look at Coda and they see a document, and so they compare us with Word and Google Docs and a lot of the newer players there, whether that's Confluence and Notion and Quip and Paper and so on. I think those people all start with a view of like, I need a new writing surface, and they kind of expand from there. We also get compared a lot in a bucket that is all the tables and spreadsheets players, and that's Google Sheets and Excel, but also products like Smartsheet and Airtable, number of database products we get compared there. And then the third bucket for us is things that really feel like applications. And so we'll get compared against, in the workplace with SaaS applications, or with the consumer space with mobile applications. And people will then compare us with how does Coda compare to my inventory tracker or my CRM system or so on. And so there's a number of different buckets there. Of course, our view is that that's all really one market, and that people's needs don't divide neatly into those buckets. But that's sort of just one observation of the market space. It's actually even more competitive in each of those areas. I think that the market's moving really fast. I mean, we're one of the newer players in this market. I mean, we launched about 6 months ago. Most of the players have released, most cases 2 or 3 years ago at least. Some of them much older than that. And so there's definitely a level of time. You have to be patient as products like these communities evolve with them. And we're working as fast as we can to make sure that we're responding to our community's needs and working in that space. In terms of Notion in particular, I'd probably focus on, if I look at what our makers say when they're comparing us with Notion, they generally focus on two main things. One is really the metaphor, right? The construct of a doc versus a wiki. And I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer in that, but it leads to a very different set of use cases. And there's just a set of things. Our philosophy was start as a doc. Our view was that was the most universal canvas that people understand. It's very important to start familiar. The over 40% of Coda docs are just docs. I mean, they're just people writing and taking notes and so on before they get to any of all the advanced features we just showed you. They'll often start with very, very simple things. But that notion of a doc lends well to certain use cases, and I think wikis lend well to other use cases. As an example, we'll see people will often, they'll have their one-on-ones with their reports, and that's a use case that's very natural in a document and a little bit harder in a different experience. And there's other experiences that are perhaps more natural in a wiki construct. So I think that's probably one bucket of things we hear is docs versus wikis. The other one I think we generally hear is the power to grow into more powerful apps. And one of our statements and promises is that we allow anyone to make a doc as powerful as an app. When people compare Coda that way, they tend to hold up that viewpoint that Coda allows them to build things that really feel like applications. And there's sort of a couple different variants of that. On one side, there's people for which that statement, docs as powerful as apps, is all about the look. And so for them, they generally look at our mobile experience, and you pull up a Coda doc on a phone, and your tabs, your sections turn into tabs, and your buttons turn them into swipe actions, and all of a sudden, this thing you are working on that felt very document-like feels very app-like on your phone. And for other people, it's about what the doc does. So they'll look at it and say, they'll generally look at features like buttons and packs and automations, and they'll say, I can use this and complete an end-to-end workflow, and I can do things like automate my calendaring system or change how my team operates or so on. So anyway, that at a high level, I think the evolution in the space is really exciting. It's definitely it's been fun to watch. I think everybody's constantly surprised by what everybody's working on. I think the approaches are different, which I think is to the benefit of the consumer. I don't think necessarily mutually exclusive. We have a lot of people that use all those tools side by side, but we certainly enjoy being up against smart, interesting people trying new things.
Definitely. Well, it's really exciting time, I think, definitely. But I think Coda's doing some really, really interesting things. So thanks for taking your time out and exploring all of the different things about Coda. I think people really enjoy this talk.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Francesco.
Awesome. And another thing, I don't think you told me that Coda was a doc backwards. I should have I should have worked it out, but I didn't actually know that.
It's one of those little Easter eggs in the name, and it's when we did our naming. So the company was actually our initial name was Krypton. That was our code name when we started the company, and that's mostly my. I have a Superman obsession, and so I called it Krypton, and then right when we were getting up to do our beta launch, we decided to rename the product. And we did an exercise. See, in Coda, there's a document in the template gallery for naming. And we go through this exercise, and everybody would submit names, and then we would vote on them, and so on. And even in that process, that name was on the list for a full week before somebody realized that it's a doc backwards. And then all of a sudden, that name went from being like, the 10th or 15th name, and all of a sudden it shot to the top. Because once we saw that, it's kind of impossible to unsee it. And it's a good play on words and a good story. So yeah, I really like it.
It's nice. It's really nice. And I hope the Avengers mug didn't offend you during that.
No, that's okay. I think superheroes are all valuable.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Well, thanks for taking the time out, and we'll catch up soon. But it was a brilliant overview.
Thanks, Francesco.